We're going to be looking at the book of Judges, characters from the book of Judges. And we're looking at two this morning, Deborah and Barak. And for 20 years, Israel, the people of God, have been worshipping false gods. So God who is a holy God, we've just been singing about the holiness of God. God who is holy sent their enemies into the land, the Canaanites, and the Canaanites plundered the land, took their wheat, the crops, their harvests off them, took their iron to make chariots, and regularly raided into the land and took what they wanted. And so they did something right here. In the book of Judges, you'll find that it says that they cried out. When it got so bad, they cried out to the Lord, and the Lord heard them. And he sent them a woman. This was unusual because the judges were all men. But he sent a woman, a godly woman, a wise woman called Deborah. And she became the judge. Now, the judges were the leaders, really, of the land. There was no king in this period of Israel's history. All the nations around them had kings and royal families. But Israel, their God was their king. But they were desiring to have a man, a king over them. But God, in God's timing, he let them have a king. But here, Deborah became a judge, and Barak. Now, there they are. The soldiers would come in, the Canaanites, under a man called Sisera, the leader of their army, and they would plunder the land, give the people a really bad time, and the people were in anguish about what to do. And so they prayed, and God raised up this woman called Deborah. She was a leader, and it said she sat under the tree, and she helped the people to understand what was wrong and what was right. Things had become so bad they didn't know the difference between right and wrong. And she sat and taught the people. And God spoke to Deborah and said, I want you to go and speak to a man called Barak. And I want you to tell him to raise up an army in Israel, 10,000 soldiers, to fight Sisera. And so when Deborah spoke to Barak, he said, I'll do it, but I'll only do it if you go with me. If you don't go with me, I'm not going. So whether he lacked assurance or confidence, or whether there was something else wrong here, Barak nevertheless done what he was asked, and he raised an army of 10,000 men, and under Deborah's guidance they made a plan to battle with Sisera and the Canaanites. The Canaanites had 900 iron chariots. Now if you can imagine 900 tanks, put it in modern day equivalents, a chariot was a pretty useful weapon. It's not recorded here that Israel had any chariots, but they had 900 chariots. They were ready to fight wars, and that's what they'd been doing. And most probably they had far more soldiers than Israel. It's not recorded, the numbers here, but Israel had 10,000 men. They weren't used to fighting. Sisera and his army were fighting men. They were used to warfare. They controlled the land for 20 years. So it didn't look good on paper for Israel, did it? But God gave Deborah wisdom, and they called for a battle. And Sisera got all his men and got his chariots ready, 900 chariots of iron. And Israel had 10,000 men. And what happened? A great battle happened. But if you read in chapter 5 of the book of Judges, you find there in the poem of Deborah that God actually intervened in the battle. He sent a downpour. You see the downpour we've had recently? Far more worse than that. He sent a downpour, and there was a great big river nearby, and the banks of the river overflowed and flooded the fields where they were fighting. And so the chariot wheels, what happened to them? They got stuck in the mud. They got stuck in the ground. And Israel defeated and killed all of the Canaanite army, except for one man. Who do you think that was? A man called Sisera. And he ran, Sisera ran, and tried to escape. And he ended up running towards a tent that he saw. And he ran to this tent, and this woman called him in. Her name was Jael. And he said, please give me a drink of water. And she gave him some milk to drink. And he was absolutely exhausted. He said, if anyone comes and says, there's a man in this tent, don't tell them. But God had prepared Jael to do something here, which was quite horrendous, but nevertheless had to be done. Sisera was a very wicked man. He was under the judgment of God for the life that he lived, for the crimes that he committed. So Jael took a tent peg and a hammer, and she killed Sisera. And he died in the tent. And that day, a great victory was had in Israel. And God used Deborah's wisdom, Deborah's godliness, and Barak's willingness to fight to defeat a great enemy that ruled Israel in the days of the judges. So we learn things here. God uses unlikely people, doesn't he? He used the woman. It wasn't normally a woman that would lead the nation, but he used this woman, Deborah. Barak, he was uncertain, unsure perhaps of going to war, but he went, he obeyed, and he went. And he used a housewife, Jael, to kill a man who was a very wicked man in the scriptures, who was under judgment of God, and she executed him. So God uses unlikely people. He uses boys and girls of all kinds, mums and dads, men and women, to do his work. That's who God is, and we're going to see more of that in the book of Judges in the coming week.